that means it's dead, right? It's dead. As a public product, it's dead, surely.
Tricking users into authorizing payments, which is just crazy.
Personally, whenever I went to use it, I was excited. I'm going to go and visually design my OpenAPI. I'm so excited I don't have to write JSON or YAML.
The whole network APIs thing feels a little bit dead in the water to me.
APIs are how AI gets work done.
Hey all, welcome back to the API and Anchor, a special place where we can sit down, grab a drink and talk about all things API. I'm Martin, and today, of course, I'm joined by Josh. Josh, how you doing?
Cheers.
Cheers. Still haven't got the tankards.
We'll get it. We'll get it you for Christmas, promise.
Oh, it's okay. Great. Thank you. That's fully branded, when it comes to drinking implements. So we've got a selection of great things to talk about today. So we're going to kick it off with some of the latest things that have been happening in the world of API. And one of the things that landed actually, and this one's particularly interesting for me, and I'll say why in just a second, is that Nokia has bought RapidAPI. According to their press release, Nokia has acquired RapidAPI's technology, including the world's largest API hub and its R&D unit, to strengthen its network as code platform.
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting, right? It was a bit of a surprise to see Nokia buy this. It's a bit of a surprise to see Nokia still around, actually, after what happened at Microsoft. But I guess I only have one thought here. That means it's dead, right? It's dead. As a public product, it's dead, surely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is very much, acquiring assets and acquiring team is, it's no mention of any figures or anything, right? So it's clearly, it's gone for a song, and it's like being able to pick it up. But it's an interesting time to do it because they're putting it out there as this is going to be something that's going to help them do the expansion of network as code. And network as code is a platform that they've been pushing for a while as like a almost aggregator SaaS platform for working with telco APIs, right? And that's kind of the position that Nokia have been taking. They're providing a lot of hardware in the telco networking space. They're pushing on 5G standalone, which is the next big step as far as telephony is concerned. And a lot of the things that brings with it is the ability to do a lot of programmatic stuff via API on the network itself, right? To actually program the network. All of the telcos are very excited about this. It's their next big thing that they feel like they're going to be able to own, and at least this time, monetize effectively. Like unlike when they got crushed by Twilio and the others on sending an SMS and them making an enormous amount of money on something that they were effectively buying from the telcos for like 10 cents and selling for $1. So this is their big push on this. And this acquisition, I don't really know how it really strengthens that, because to be honest, the whole network APIs thing feels a little bit dead in the water to me. That might be a spicy take on this, but I just don't really see how this technology really moves that much forward at the moment. It feels like if it happened a few years ago, it would have been great, but it's not really come together yet. There's hardly any coverage on 5G standalone in a lot of countries. The adoption's really poor. The actual ability to work with it as far as API is concerned is really spotty and relatively sketchy. And without working with an actual aggregator, you're going to be in a very difficult position. But I don't really see how RapidAPI's move into Nokia makes that much of a difference here, other than I think the marketplace technology that Nokia doesn't currently have, right? So if you want to buy this kind of technology, buy into network APIs from different vendors such as Orange or Telefonica or Singapore Telecom or any of the others that are going to be doing this, then having an API marketplace that effectively aggregates all of them together potentially offers some kind of interesting proposition. But to be honest, I don't really see it.
In my opinion, it seems now like RapidAPI as we know it is probably done and dusted. And so folks who leverage that and use their marketplace, there was a lot of APIs on there, and there was rumored to be something like 4 million developers using this thing. I am yet to meet one actually who was an RapidAPI customer. It's kind of weird, but I'm sure they're out there. But yeah, it seems like the death knell for that scenario. So it's going to be interesting to see what comes to replace it. I mean, there's plenty of places to monetize APIs. I guess there's a couple of hubs now, like programmable web style things, but I assume we'll see a rush of a rush of activity to sort of run in and fill the white space.
Yeah, most likely. I'm interested to know what other people's opinions are on this one, though, because it doesn't really scream any kind of success, and I'm not sure it really lends itself to being particularly successful after this point either. So it's going to be interesting to see how Nokia do it. But if you got thoughts on this, then please do drop it in a comment below, and feel free to argue with me about the adoption of network APIs as well.
Awesome.
All right, what's up next? So something that we pulled out from one of the many articles, in fact, that Kin Lane has put out recently. He's been quite prolific in terms of his writing and blogging of late. Was an article that he wrote called Investing in the Future of the Visual OpenAPI Editor, which is a little bit more of a call for why is in 2024, almost 2025, why are we still in a situation where OpenAPI editors aren't visual and are still reliant on client side, on command line as opposed to other things, and sitting inside of GitOps and other aspects. And right now there isn't a way for you to go in and actually construct an OpenAPI document for yourself in a visual manner.
Yeah, so as always, we're big fans of Kin, and it seems like he's a fan of Zuplo. He mentions us quite often. I kind of agree with him, but then it makes me think about was it Stoplight or Spotlight? I can never remember which spelling is the right one. Stoplight, yeah. The most famous sort of OpenAPI editor of recent times, acquired by Smartbear and being integrated into their stack. I think that's probably the best shot we've seen at this. But if I'm honest, personally, whenever I went to use it, I was excited. I'm going to go and visually design my OpenAPI. I'm so excited I don't have to write JSON or YAML. And I just found it not fun, frankly. Like, I felt like it was literally a Windows Forms over JSON design tool. Like, just like fields and values and objects, and there wasn't much brought to it. I do have some ideas which I'll hold back right now on, like, what I think this could look like. But be honest, like, I'm not sure what this is from Kin. Is he writing a spec? Like, who's gonna build this now? We've seen that Stoplight have struggled to make it into a real business that can grow on its own. I agree with Kin that it's going to suffer if it's just built as some part of a bundle of an API management platform like Zuplo, for example, and like we've seen Kong and these folks do. They sort of have an API designer, but they're always kind of naff. I think the way something like this gets good and does well is very Bruno-esque from your review of like HTTP clients. It's like an open source version that's built by a passionate community that love it. I will openly say we don't have any plans to tackle this in the near term. We have a bit of an open API designer in Zuplo, but it's not like, I wouldn't say this is the go-to product at all. It's really to help you set up your gateway. The other competitive thing here is AI is so good at this now.
Yeah,
like,
it is.
AI is like really good tooling for building open. I use it so much when I'm messing around with OpenAPI now. So yeah, who's going to build it? I don't know. I mean, yeah, I kind of agree with what Kin said, but I don't know what the model would be and who would do it. So maybe there's some open source thing going to get off the ground. That would be exciting, but I just don't see it being I wouldn't invest in a startup doing this right now. I'll be honest, if I was an investor.
No, and I don't think anybody's really looking to do that either. I think that the route is definitely going to be, a passionate group of people get together and go down an open source route, potentially defining, how you actually do this visually, and then thinking about how they can build that into, the myriad of editors that people use on the daily, right? So, how do you plug this into VS Code? How do you plug this into JetBrains? How do you make this work with tooling that already exists for a lot of people? But then I'm just like, you know what, even if everybody did that and it was there and it was integrated in my editor, I don't think I'd ever be sitting down to go, I'm going to construct an OpenAPI document at this point. Right, just as you say, LLMs do this very well. If you've got some decent tooling in place, you can get this out of your API as it stands. You can then make that a lot better using LLMs if you want to. I mean, we've done videos on how good LLMs actually are when it comes to generating OpenAPI documents with very minimal prompting, but then also how good they are at taking feedback on the documents that they created.
Yeah.
And correcting them to the point where, we've got, Anthropic Claude Sonnet 3.5 scoring 99 out of 100 on Rate My OpenAPI, Am I going to be able to do better than that with a visual editor? Probably not. But the other
Mm.
things is I'm just not going to sit down and take the time.
Yeah, I do imagine a world where there was a good designer, though. When you think about, we just did this recently for an internal project, and we had to design an API, and we wanted to do it design first. We ended up using like a Google Doc and just writing it in, and then building the OpenAPI out of it. I can imagine something a little cleaner, a little bit more API native that would enable that. I don't know if it's a viable business, though. Again, I think it'd be a cool open source project.
Next up, something that I know that a lot of companies have seen, and I've spoken to a lot of people who've also been down this route, and it's been reported on, in various different places as well. Is cybercriminals are using the DocuSign API to send fake invoices, using legitimate DocuSign accounts and templates to create realistic fake invoices, bypassing traditional phishing defenses and tricking users into authorizing payments, which is just crazy.
So we've seen a bit of this recently, actually. There's a big uptake in this notion of like fake invoices being sent out, and will you just buy it and respond to it? I can imagine a lot of bigger companies are just so, encumbered by red tape and bureaucracy that it doesn't get noticed, and these invoices just get paid. I think we've been pretty good at picking them up, but like random things coming into our business to Zuplo for invoice we haven't, our accountant is like, "What is this?" I'm like, "I don't know." So I'm not surprised to see that on the uptick. The fact that DocuSign's legit credentials, that means someone got access to someone with a real account like Zuplo and is sending these on, on sort of behalf of that company, but then obviously offering different payment accounts and so on for the money to go into. It's like scary, right? This stuff is just going to get so much worse with AI as well. What does it mean? I mean, obviously it highlights, I think it's a little mean to pick on DocuSign specifically, but I don't actually know how these credentials got leaked, but it does tell me, that API security is like very important, folks, and don't forget the basics. At this point, if you are doing API key authentication and you don't have things like secret scanning, because that would be such a rich repository I'm sure if DocuSign uses API keys, I'm sure GitHub is probably full of them if they're not using secret scanning. If you don't have like protections like that on your API, when you're using that authentication mechanism, you should probably be fired at this point. It's just so dangerous. And this is an example of how APIs could be weaponized. But yeah, I mean, that's my quick take on it. Yeah, we're definitely seeing an uptick on this sort of thing. I think as APIs become more prevalent, more important, they're going to become a bigger attack vector, and their security is going to become even more critical.
All right. So the next thing is this is something I discovered over the weekend, and I thought that this was super cool because I love it when it's as simple, when anything is as simple as just spitting out a .txt file and things happening off the back of that. And what we're talking about here is the emergence of, not yet a standard, but maybe it will become one, the idea of something called LLMs.txt, which is a proposal that websites should have a domain/LLMs.txt that effectively outlines what it is that service does, where to find documentation, where to find API endpoints, and so that LLMs or other methods of discovery can understand faster and more coherently how that service works. And that includes everything from just giving an idea about where documentation is, all the way through to having your entire documentation represented in there so that it can be easily consumed by AI agents, which is kind of fascinating that this is the approach that people are thinking about taking and seemingly adopting at a relatively fast clip at the moment, is all just text files, Josh.
Yeah, I'm a bit confused about this. I mean, it makes sense to me from if we can think of the equivalent of robots.txt, right? Sounds like the inspiration for this. So I can see that being useful guidance for the LLMs crawlers and so on, of like, you're not to use this, you're not to go down here. This is, you cannot use this information in your learning or training without signing an agreement with us. I can see LLMs.txt being useful for that. The idea of us needing to tell an LLM what stuff means seems daft to me, if I'm honest. Like, that's what LLMs are kind of good at, right? Like, you can give it a website and it's going to work it out. It'll work out where the docs are. We see that all the time. Like now, I don't know about you, but ChatGPT, I'll call it out where I'm using that more at the moment, has replaced 80% of my Google usage at this point. Would be my guess. And so I think it's already really good at understanding that. So I don't see the value of LLMs.txt personally in describing the layout of a site or where things are. It should be good at finding that. I see it as valuable from a point of view of like telling it the rules of like, hey, oi, thou shalt not use this information or not scrape this, or because you have the no follow command right in robots.txt.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my hot take. What do you think?
Perhaps this is a little bit more of a short-term fix that leads more to a higher level of adoption and understanding, right? Because yeah, you can give an LLM like an entire documentation website and it could work stuff out, but it's gonna have some trouble dealing with single page websites, things that aren't necessarily rendered server side, things that are client side rendered, a couple of other things there that would make it a little bit trickier for it to understand it. You've also, when you give it, for instance, when you give an LLM like an entire website and you give it all of this HTML, you're blowing up the context window with a lot of stuff that doesn't necessarily need to be there, which makes it, more expensive to work with, because you're just going to be adding more and more tokens to get it to understand what it needs to extract from those pages, when you actually maybe don't need to have that there because you've got an LLM, LLMs.txt. So that's just going to be plain text. It's got all the information in it. There's nothing to strip out.
Oh, interesting. So you think LLMs.txt is going to be used more at the inference stage than the learning stage? I thought it was more of a learning thing.
I think it's more of an inference, because you've got other aspects here in terms of like understanding stuff like sitemap.xml exists, sure, right? So you don't need to understand like, what the layout is, because you've got something else that can tell you that is, standardized. I think this is much more about the ingestion point than anything else, and being able to infer stuff faster and in a shorter period of time for a lower amount of tokens ultimately. But just my take, I'm guessing on that. I think that it's tough to give any LLM a huge amount of information and say, do this with it, because of how much it can necessarily understand. I've seen this with when I give 26,000 line JSON documents full of API feedback to LLMs. Some of them deal with it well and some of them don't, and that's structured data, right? So giving it something that's as still relatively messy as HTML can be a bit of a nightmare, I think, even up to this point, especially when it's a very a large amount of pages that potentially have lots of different layouts or don't exist at all if you hit a URL until it's been rendered.
Yeah, I guess, interesting. I hadn't really thought of it from that angle. I guess I'm still a little skeptical because, well, let's see if the incentives are there, whether people would actually keep the LLMs up to date. Would the LLM trust the LLMs.txt versus reading the real site? How easily these things fall behind. I think there's a big incentive to keep like your sitemap up to date because Google is going to be a big source of business. So maybe the same is true for ChatGPT, and that's why people will keep their LLMs.txt up to date with a nice tight summary. But I don't know, I think I'd trust my LLM to do that better. But I guess I thought it was more of a learning thing. The one thing it does say, the fact that this is even a thing and becoming more important is actually, and this is a good segue into the next topic, which is the huge Kong raise, is the importance of AI on the internet now. It's it's sort of replacing 80% of my search activity probably has now gone to ChatGPT. Not just that, actually. I search a lot less, because I get multiple questions answered in one little session versus having to search 1,000 times for the right article. I just get there with one prompt. But yeah, no, I think back to the Kong thing. So, Kong just announced a raise of $175 million Series E. Series E. Yeah, Series E. So congratulations to our rivals at Kong, the gorilla folks. No, I mean, but it's exciting, obviously, to see companies doing well and that the market is growing. So I know we'll cheer them on in that regard. But there's one visual, if you can bring it up, actually, in the edit that shows the growth and the periods that have driven the growth of sort of APIs. It talks about the mainframe era was wasn't APIs weren't as we think of them today, and then the growth through like the web era, and then the mobile and cloud era, which was huge, particularly mobile, and then now we're looking at this AI era. And we have a saying at Zuplo, we're excited about AI too, because AI APIs are how AI gets work done, right? Like it needs some way of tangibly interacting with the real world, if you will, and APIs are the key way that's going to happen. So we don't see the need for sort of API management and the things we're working on from diminishing. Quite the opposite, see it increasing, and it seems like investors at least agree and are backing Kong on that basis.
Big news, and congratulations to everyone over at Kong for that. I'm sure that everyone's vested stock is feeling a lot better today.
I'm sure it is. Yeah. There, congrats to them.
Awesome scenes. All right. Well, look, Josh, I think I hear the bell being rung in the background.
Dan, come on. I don't want to.
They're calling time, and it's time for us to make our merry way back to wherever it is that we came from. Josh, thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. Thank you all for watching. If this is the kind of thing that you're enjoying and you want to hear more about everything that's going on in the world of APIs, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like if you found it entertaining in any way or you appreciated the information that we shared. And of course, if you have anything to say about any of the stories we talked about, feel free to drop a comment down below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.